I was sitting in my small apartment in Chicago, surrounded by piles of papers and notes about a cold case that consumed me. The yellowed light from the desk lamp illuminated my face, but it couldn't alleviate the darkness that was accumulating in my mind. Frustrated, I ran my fingers through my hair, pulling a few strands behind my ear as I tried to organize my thoughts. The case of the Spectre, a criminal who seemed to dance between the shadows of the city, had intrigued me from the moment I first read about him. But the more I investigated, the more powerless I felt. "Why does no one talk about this?" I muttered, looking out the window at the city sprawling before me, full of life, but also secrets. How can this go on without answers? The Spectre had left a trail of fear and mystery, and I was determined to unearth the truth. Hours passed as I reviewed the data, but frustration mounted. To many, he was just an urban legend, a character in stories that circulated in police corridors and bar conversations. But to me, he was real, a man who, for some reason, had become a specter of the city itself. I want to make a difference, I thought. I want his voice to be heard. In that moment of despair, my determination ignited like a flame. I needed to push forward, no matter how difficult it was. When night fell, I decided it was time to dive deeper into the files. The atmosphere in the apartment began to shift. A subtle breeze started to blow through the cracks in the window, making the curtains dance softly. The sensation was strange, as if something was about to happen. "I think I'm going crazy," I laughed nervously, trying to brush off the growing feeling that I wasn't alone. As I flipped through the yellowed pages, an odd sensation overtook me. It felt like someone was watching me. "Julia?" The gentle whisper sliced through the silence of the night, and my heart raced. I turned quickly, nearly knocking over the cup of coffee on my desk. And there he was, the silhouette of the Spectre, shrouded in shadows, watching me with an intense gaze that seemed to pierce my very soul. What do you want?" I stammered, my voice trembling. He moved with a supernatural elegance, as if gravity didn't affect him. "You need to tell my story, Julia," he whispered, his voice echoing in my mind like a distant melody. "Only you can do it." "But I'm just a journalist," I protested, feeling terror grip me. "Why me?" He stepped closer, and a chill ran down my spine. "Because you believe in the truth, and the truth needs to be revealed." In that instant, reality seemed to warp. Fear and curiosity intertwined within me. "What are you saying? You're a criminal. Why should I trust you?" He smiled, but it wasn't a smile of satisfaction. It was tragic, as if he carried an immense weight. "I'm not just a criminal, Julia. I was made this way. You need to understand." And with a subtle movement, he vanished, leaving behind an air of mystery and a cold that seemed to seep into my bones. I was alone again, but his presence still lingered in the room. "This can't be real," I repeated to myself, trying to find a logical explanation for what had just happened. Yet, despite that, the idea of investigating more about the Spectre began to form in my mind. I needed to know who he really was, what secrets he held. The truth was out there, hidden in the shadows, and I was determined to bring it to light, no matter the cost. With renewed resolve, I grabbed my notebooks and began to research, diving deeper into a world that promised to be darker than I ever imagined. The Chicago Public Library had always been a refuge for me. The smell of aged paper and the reverent silence welcomed me like an old friend. However, that day, as I wandered through the shelves, the weight of what I was about to discover pressed against my chest. The soft light streaming through the windows seemed to dance over the ancient books, but my focus was on a specific, yellowed article that spoke of the Spectre's crimes. "He escaped again," I murmured to myself, my voice almost lost among the turned pages. The brutality of his acts was almost tangible. Men, women, lives shattered, all without justice being served. The way he always seemed to vanish, like a ghost, was terrifying and fascinating at the same time. How can someone be so cunning? I thought, tangling my fingers in the pages of the newspaper. It was at that moment that a familiar voice echoed behind me. "Are you really thinking about going through with this, Julia?" It was my coworker, Lucas, always so skeptical. He approached with the expression of someone who knew I was getting involved in something dangerous. "Lucas, you don't understand. This is a story that needs to be told. If I don't do it, who will?" I replied, trying to mask the insecurity in my voice. "You could put yourself at risk." "The specter isn't just an urban legend, he's real. And he's dangerous," he insisted, his eyes reflecting concern. "I can't ignore this. If there's a chance to expose the truth, I have to try," I affirmed, determined not to let fear paralyze me. Lucas sighed but couldn't hide his admiration for my tenacity. "Be careful, Julia, just be careful," he said before walking away, leaving me alone again with my thoughts and the weight of the responsibility I felt. The walk home was a mix of anxiety and excitement. Each step brought me closer to the truth, but also closer to the unknown. When my phone rang, the shock almost made me drop it. I looked at the screen and saw an unknown number. I hesitated but eventually answered. "Give up, Julia." The voice on the other end was cold and authoritative, like a cutting blade. "This isn't for you. What you're doing could have terrible consequences." "Who are you? What do you know about what I'm doing?" I asked, adrenaline surging as my heart raced. I was sitting in my small apartment in Chicago, surrounded by piles of papers and notes about a cold case that consumed me. The yellowed light from the desk lamp illuminated my face, but it couldn't alleviate the darkness that was accumulating in my mind. Frustrated, I ran my fingers through my hair, pulling a few strands behind my ear as I tried to organize my thoughts. The case of the specter, a criminal who seemed to dance between the shadows of the city, had intrigued me from the moment I first read about him. But the more I investigated, the more powerless I felt. "Why does no one talk about this?" I muttered, looking out the window at the city sprawling before me, full of life, but also secrets. How can this go on without answers? The specter had left a trail of fear and mystery, and I was determined to unearth the truth. Hours passed as I reviewed the data, but frustration mounted. To many, he was just an urban legend, a character in stories that circulated in police corridors and bar conversations. But to me, he was real, a man who, for some reason, had become a specter of the city itself. I want to make a difference, I thought. I want his voice to be heard. In that moment of despair, my determination ignited like a flame. I needed to push forward, no matter how difficult it was. When night fell, I decided it was time to dive deeper into the files. The atmosphere in the apartment began to shift. A subtle breeze started to blow through the cracks in the window, making the curtains dance softly. The sensation was strange, as if something was about to happen. "I think I'm going crazy," I laughed nervously, trying to brush off the growing feeling that I wasn't alone. As I flipped through the yellowed pages, an odd sensation overtook me. It felt like someone was watching me. "Julia?" The gentle whisper sliced through the silence of the night, and my heart raced. I turned quickly, nearly knocking over the cup of coffee on my desk. And there he was, the silhouette of the specter, shrouded in shadows, watching me with an intense gaze that seemed to pierce my very soul. What do you want?" I stammered, my voice trembling. He moved with a supernatural elegance, as if gravity didn't affect him. "You need to tell my story, Julia," he whispered, his voice echoing in my mind like a distant melody. "Only you can do it." "But I'm just a journalist," I protested, feeling terror grip me. "Why me?" He stepped closer, and a chill ran down my spine. "Because you believe in the truth, and the truth needs to be revealed." In that instant, reality seemed to warp. Fear and curiosity intertwined within me. "What are you saying? You're a criminal. Why should I trust you?" He smiled, but it wasn't a smile of satisfaction. It was tragic, as if he carried an immense weight. "I'm not just a criminal, Julia. I was made this way. You need to understand." Part of me wanted to believe there was justification, that his actions were a consequence of a failing system. But another part of me feared it was merely a way to rationalize what he had done. As I reflected on this, I realized my investigation was beginning to deepen. The diary contained clues about a network of corruption that extended far beyond what I could imagine. The specter spoke of an influential politician, someone who had always been protected by shadows, someone who had everything to gain from the silence of the oppressed. My stomach churned at the thought that I might be about to expose something that many preferred to keep buried. "He is the true monster," the specter wrote, "and I am merely a reflection of what he has created." With each word, the feeling that I was on a dangerous path intensified. Adrenaline coursed through my veins, for I knew I was about to touch on secrets that could come at a high price. After hours of analyzing the diary, I sat down at the kitchen table, the light from the lamp casting dancing shadows on the walls. I began taking notes, connecting the dots, and trying to establish links between what the specter had written and the information I had already gathered. If the specter is right, I am not just in search of a story. I am about to expose a truth that many would rather forget. However, a chill ran down my spine at the thought of the consequences. What if I was being watched? The idea that I could become a target for someone powerful and dangerous began to consume me. Ignoring the fear, I took a deep breath and decided I would not back down. What was at stake was greater than me. That night, as I prepared for sleep, a strange sensation took hold of me. The feeling of being watched was palpable. I stepped out onto the balcony and looked down at the street, illuminated by lampposts. In the distance, the echo of footsteps made me turn. My heart raced. It was just darkness and the whisper of the wind, but the image of the specter wouldn't leave my mind. Tell his story echoed in my thoughts. I needed to do this, not just for him, but for all who had been silenced. At that moment, I realized I was at a crossroads. What I did next could change not only my life, but the lives of many others. The quest for truth was becoming increasingly risky, but I was willing to face the ghosts of the past. And somehow, I knew that the specter, even in his ethereal form, would be by my side on this journey. The night was cold and shrouded in thick fog when I finally decided to confront the figure following me. My heart raced, and a mix of fear and curiosity consumed me. As I turned, I recognized the familiar face I hadn't seen in ages. Mike, my former college classmate, stood there, worry etched on his face. "Julia," he exclaimed, visibly relieved. "I thought you were another victim of that damned specter." "What are you doing here?" I asked, trying to hide the incredulity in my voice. "Did you follow me?" "Actually, I was looking for you. I received a warning to stop investigating the specter, but I can't ignore it." He hesitated, and I could see the internal struggle in his eyes. "We need to join forces." Mike's proposal made my heart race even faster. Together, we could be stronger, and the thought of having someone by my side was reassuring. "I agree," I replied, determined. "But we need to be careful. There's too much at stake." We sat on a park bench, where the shadows of the trees seemed to stretch and twist into strange shapes. Mike pulled out some notes and a laptop from his backpack. He had delved deep into the research on the specter and its ties to the influential politician. "Look at this," he said, opening a file on the computer. I found a pattern. All the victims were somehow connected to this politician. He might be behind a cover-up scheme that goes beyond just the specter. My stomach churned. The implications were enormous. The politician, an icon of the city, had blood on his hands. "This could change everything, Mike. We need to be cautious. If he finds out we're onto him, he could silence us. We can't let that stop us." The determination in Mike's voice was contagious. He was right. What was at stake was bigger than us. "Okay, let's dig deeper. We need concrete proof," I suggested, already mapping out a plan in my mind. We spent the following hours immersed in files and records, each new discovery bringing us closer to the truth. Amidst notes and images, we found a document that appeared to be a list of missing persons. Most of them were whistleblowers against corruption, and the dates coincided with the crimes attributed to the specter. "Look at this." Mike pointed to the screen, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "If we can connect this to the politician, we can expose everything." "But how are we going to do that?" I asked, the weight of responsibility starting to settle on my shoulders. "We need a plan. Let's infiltrate an event he's organizing." Mike's idea sent my heart racing. A charity event, where everyone would be watching closely, would be the perfect place to gather information. We can use this to our advantage. I felt a rush of adrenaline at the thought of the possibility. The tension between us grew as the day of the event approached. While we reviewed the final details, I couldn't help but notice the worry in Mike's eyes. "Julia, I don't want you to put yourself in danger. This politician is not someone to mess with." He held my arm, his gaze locked onto mine. "I know, Mike, but this is the only way we have to bring the truth to light, and I can't do this alone." The determination in his expression eased some of the concern I felt. He was right, and together we were stronger. That night, as we prepared our things, a strange sensation washed over me. It was as if something was watching us, and it wasn't just the shadow of the specter. "Are you feeling okay?" Mike asked, noticing my hesitation. "Just a feeling." I couldn't explain it, but the sense of being watched was palpable. "Let's stay alert. We can't let anything catch us off guard." The idea that we were about to uncover something much bigger than ourselves made me uneasy, but also excited. It was time to act, and I was ready to face whatever came next. The search for the truth was just beginning, and the shadow of the specter loomed over us. A constant reminder that justice, though often obscured, could still prevail. It was a cold night in Chicago, and the biting breeze made my bones tremble as Mike and I arrived at the elegant charity event. I couldn't believe we were about to infiltrate an event that attracted the city's elite, where ostentation and hypocrisy danced hand in hand. The hall was filled with well-dressed guests, fake smiles, and empty speeches. But there I was, adrenaline pumping and heart racing, determined to uncover the truth about the politician hiding behind all that facade. "Are you ready to do this?" Mike asked, a worried look on his face. He had always been more cautious, while my passion for the truth often led me into risky situations. "Ready enough," I replied, adjusting my blouse, trying to blend in with the crowd. "Remember, if we find anything, we need to get out fast." We dispersed among the guests. While Mike tried to get close to some influential figures to listen to their conversations, I moved toward a table where some documents were visibly displayed. My heart raced with each step, and the feeling of being watched began to envelop me again. I looked around, and that's when I saw him. In the far corner of the hall, amid the dim light, stood the familiar silhouette of the specter. His eyes were locked onto me, as if encouraging me to continue. A mix of fear and courage took hold of me. "He's here," I murmured to myself, feeling a chill run down my spine. What did he want from me? A sign? Help? I needed to understand. "Julia," Mike called, his voice breaking my concentration. He was near the back door, looking anxiously around. "Come on, we need to get out of here. They're starting to notice we don't belong." "Just a moment," I said, not taking my eyes off the specter. He seemed to understand my hesitation and made a subtle gesture, as if calling me closer. The impulse to follow his lead was irresistible, but reason pulled me back. "I just need to know if he's here to help," I thought, striving to decipher what that presence meant. I decided I couldn't ignore what was happening. With one last look at the specter, I turned my attention back to Mike, who appeared increasingly anxious. "Let's regroup and leave," I said, forcing a smile. "We have to act fast before they notice." However, I couldn't completely shake off what I felt. The connection with the specter was becoming more intense, as if he were guiding me. As we passed through a side room, I spotted something shiny on the floor. I was drawn to the object. As I bent down, I realized it was a chain I recognized immediately. It belonged to the specter, something I had seen in old photos of his life before he became the feared criminal everyone knew. "Julia, what are you doing?" Mike asked, urgency in his voice. I ignored him, gripping the chain tightly. Its weight reminded me that the line between good and evil was much more complex than I had imagined. The specter could be a villain, but he was also a victim of a corrupt system. "We need this," I replied, standing up with the chain in hand. "This could be the proof we need to confront that politician." But before we could move, the door swung open with a bang. Two burly men, clearly security for the event, entered, their eyes locked on us. The tension in the air was palpable. "What are you doing here?" one of them asked in an authoritative tone. "We're just admiring the artwork," I said, trying to sound casual, though my heart was racing in my chest. "Leave now, or I'll call the police," the other man threatened, advancing toward us. "Let's go," I shouted to Mike, and without thinking twice, we bolted toward the exit of the hall. The sound of heavy footsteps followed us, and my mind was a jumbled mess. What had I found? What did the specter want me to do? The only thing I knew was that I couldn't stop now. The truth was closer than ever, and I wasn't going to give up. Adrenaline surged through my veins as Mike and I approached the politician's house. The bright lights illuminated the path, but a cloud of tension hung in the air, as if we were being watched. I felt the weight of responsibility on my shoulders. The truth we were about to uncover could change everything. "Are you sure this is a good idea?" Mike asked. hesitating at the gate. "We have no choice," I replied, trying to sound confident, even though a part of me was paralyzed by fear. "We need the proof. The specter brought us here for a reason." As soon as we entered the house, the silence was deafening. The scent of polished wood and a faint whiff of something sweet filled our nostrils, but there was no time to appreciate it. Cautiously, we made our way to the basement, where we believed the politician kept his darkest secrets. Each step echoed, and I wondered if we were being followed. "Look at this," Mike whispered, pointing to a slightly open door. The dim light filtering through it seemed promising. With a nod, I pushed the door open, and as we stepped inside, our eyes widened. What we found was a clandestine laboratory, filled with documents, samples of unidentified substances, and photos of missing persons. "This can't be real," I murmured, picking up one of the photographs. The face was familiar, one of the specter's victims. Before we could process the gravity of the situation, a familiar presence filled the room. The air around us shifted, and suddenly the specter appeared before us. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice echoing like a haunting whisper. "But now that you are, the truth must be revealed." You're the politician's brother?" I managed to ask, my heart racing. Mike and I exchanged incredulous glances. The specter nodded, and his form seemed to waver, as if the pain of his story was about to overflow. "Yes, I was murdered to silence the truth. He has used my name and the crimes I committed as a smokescreen. But corruption cannot win," he said, anger and sorrow mingling in his voice. "You have the power to expose all of this. I'm here to help you." A chill ran down my spine. It felt as if the idea that I could be the voice for someone who could no longer speak was taking shape. "What do we need to do?" I asked, determined. "The documents you found are the key. If you go to the press, the truth will be known," the specter said, his expression intensifying. "But you need to act quickly. He's going to find out you're here." "Let's go," Mike exclaimed, and together we began gathering the documents as the specter guided us. "I always knew something was wrong. I never imagined it was this close," Mike said, his voice tense. "It's time to put an end to this," I declared, feeling determination swell within me. As we exited the laboratory, the door slammed shut behind us with a bang, and adrenaline pushed me forward. We need to get out of here before he arrives. We raced through the house, and when we reached the car, a scream echoed behind us. Looking back, I saw the politician approaching, his expression one of terrifying rage. "You can't do this. You have no idea what you're getting into. We're here to expose your lies," I shouted back as Mike started the car and hit the gas. The specter appeared once more, now by my side, like a protective shadow. "Go, the truth will prevail." Finally, we made it to the newspaper office. The team was there, and I knew I had to act fast. "We have a story you won't believe," I said, handing the documents to one of the editors. The words spilled out with an excitement I didn't know I possessed. "It's time to expose the corruption that has taken over this city." With the truth finally in sight, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. The specter, now in its most serene form, looked at me with a glimmer of gratitude in its eyes. "You did this. Now, justice will be served," it whispered. With that, it began to dissipate, its final words echoing in my mind. "Thank you, Julia. The story has been told." I smiled, knowing that despite the terror and corruption that once plagued Chicago, there was now a new hope.